It is a hot category, and we have the hottest asset hidden inside of Intel. So we wanted to give it more visibility. This is now where we're seeing that inflection point in the AV category. Mobileye pioneered ADAS, and now it's going to leap forward to be a leader in the entire AV technology sector.
That was Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger on the reason behind spinning off the company's autonomous vehicle division, Mobileye. The IPO expected to come mid-next year. The news sending Intel shares up nearly 5% today, but it wasn't the only chip name ripping higher. Check out the moves in Marvell, NVIDIA, AMAT, Qorvo. Look at that, Marvell up 7%, NVIDIA up 8%. For more on the action, let's turn to Jared Weisfeld. He's tech sector specialist at Jefferies. I mean, Jared, it seems like the market really liked this move. What do you make of it? Does it portend potential spin-outs or acquisitions, mergers, other deals for any of the names in the space that's helping to prop this group up?
Sure. So from an Intel standpoint, the move makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, I think if you're Pat Gelsinger, if you're Intel, this will help validate the valuation of Mobileye. They acquired the asset back in 2017 for about $15 billion, right? And now potentially achieving as much of a $50 billion valuation. That would be quite strong with respect to the multiple paid. When you think about 2022, probably be about 25 times revenue. So that's a strong valuation. So that'll help validate the valuation. Number two, it helps bring in proceeds from Intel. So as you think about their diversification efforts and the ability to pursue their foundry efforts, getting that capital in the door certainly helps. But to your point, we saw a widespread rally across the entire chip sector today. Not only did Intel benefit on the news, but you saw NVIDIA, AMD, Marvell also gain on the news. And I think, what's interesting is that, you sort of look at what this brings to Intel. Was this the right decision? 100%. It helps give you that valuation. It brings capital in the door. Does this change the long-term trajectory of Intel and the issues that investors are concerned about? Not as much, right? If you're concerned about PC market share loss, if you're concerned about AI and ML, artificial intelligence, machine learning share gains at NVIDIA and Marvell and AMD, which those shares continue to rise appreciably, right? That doesn't change the long-term trajectory at Intel. So it's certainly a lot of moving parts here.
Jared, this is Nadine. I have a question for you because I think you're alluding to this, which is, they have aggressive capital spending plans, but that's just because they have been behind the curve versus peers. And so is this a sell the news event if you're an Intel owner, or how should an investor in Intel play this from this point going forward?
So if you're long Intel and you see this news, I think you have to be viewing this positively from the standpoint of the asset was acquired at $17 billion. It's now potentially going to achieve as much as a $50 billion valuation. That's a positive. You can still consolidate the financials. If you're Intel, they're going to retain majority ownership. It makes a lot of sense. They're getting proceeds in the door. The bigger fundamental question, if you're an Intel bull, is how do you think about the process technology roadmap? How do you think about their ability to execute and compete against AMD, compete against NVIDIA, compete against Marvell? Those are the long-term issues that still are unresolved, and that's why you actually saw shares of Intel underperform broader semis today, and you obviously had a risk-on day in the broader markets. The names that investors want to gravitate towards are certainly the structural share gainers, like the AMDs, the Marvells, the NVIDIAs of the world.
Jared, if we can turn you here, you of course are the tech specialist, and so we'd be remiss not to ask you about the AWS outage today. It seems like every other day there's another press release with another company that has now moved or migrated or started using AWS. This outage was pretty significant. What are the ripple effects going forward? Is this more than just a single event?
For sure, it's and it's a good reminder how the world is so tethered to all of the cloud service providers, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Google. Those three dominate our lives, and this is only going to increase supply chain complexities that have only increased significantly because of COVID over the last 12 months. What's amazing is, not only are there external implications if you're relying on AWS from a service provider perspective, that's obviously a problem with that out, but Amazon itself is being impacted pretty significantly, right? If you look at the delivery network for Amazon, you look at all of the Amazon partners that are trying to, make those deliveries and access the Amazon app via AWS. That's all down right now. So the ripple effect, not only with respect to if you're an AWS customer, but Amazon itself across the supply chain, especially in, as we approach the holiday season, this is certainly not the appropriate time to have this outage, for sure.
Jared, thank you very much for being here with us today on a very big day for your sector in general, and particularly those chips. Tim, I want to turn to you. Do you think it's too late to get in on some of these chips names after the rip that we saw? I mean, NVIDIA higher by, what, 7+% here today?
Yeah, and 15% off the low, intraday lows in 2 days. The fact that semis are closer to their all-time high than any other part of the market, so not only just the S&P or the triple Qs, but I mean within 2%. And I still think that semis are the chart to watch, and I still think that semis relative to the S&P, so if you wanted to do an SMH divided by the SPY graph, you can see that semis are arguably breaking out against the S&P through a top of a range that they've hit a couple times in the last year. So yes, I think the answer is I think there's room. I think in a world where we've seen this, one of the reasons why NVIDIA is up 15% in 2 days is because the high multiple concerned market where growth is in question is going to get whacked. But I think if you stay the course here, this is still where you want to be buying growth. And in many cases, maybe not at NVIDIA, and I'm not going to lean on NVIDIA at a reasonable price, but I think you are getting it at Qualcomm. And I do like this. I am an Intel shareholder. I do like this deal. I mean, that segment's 2% of revenues, and this could be 25% of market cap on the return on this investment. So I think it's a good day for Intel.